So what if you're pinpointed as a witch and you go through all the things, you go through the questionings, you go through the torture, but you don't give up and you're a child, you stick by what you say, what would you do in that instance? This is the second part of the Vardo trials, and this is a very, very rough part because children are involved and they are saying things because they are being tortured. It's rough to hear. We're actually going to be going over 2 trials. They kind of go into each other because it's like family from the second trial are tried in the third trial and things of that matter, but we're going to get into it. If you're new here, my name is Brandy, and I like to do these really dark history videos on witches and vampires and poisoners and all that kind of fun stuff. And while I do that, I put on some makeup on my face. So if that sounds awesome to y'all, please hit that subscribe button as I am trying to get to 500. But like I said, today we're going to be talking about the Vardo Witch Trials as we did last week. This is part 2. Yes, it is. So let's go on ahead and get this party started. So the second witch trial, because there's 2 in this one, but like I say, the second witch trial, there's not much information on it, but it was done because of storms and magic and all that other kind of stuff, and 17 people ended up losing their life in the second witch trial of Vardo. Okay, like I say, there's not much more information than that, but we do get introduced a lot back to the second one because, like I say, their family members get accused in the third trial. So we're just going to go on ahead and jump right into the third trial. The last witch trial is absolutely it is the worst of the worst. It's got to be the worst of all 3 is what I feel like. It has to be the worst of all 3 because it is the way they use kids in this one to get other people, and they're like the children of the people from the second trial, you feel me? And so they go after their children, and it's just like, it's just all right, so let's just move forward. So the third trial is from 1662 to 1663, okay? And it is a horrible trial. It's still in Vardo, which, as we know, Vardo is in northern Norway, up there by Finnmark. They're like on the corner at the very, very top, okay? Where it's like in Scandinavia, where it's like freezing waters. And so for them to say they have all these storms, it's actually kind of a normal thing, I think, for up there. Especially, you know, for when you do have a shipwreck, the waters are so cold, there's just no way you're going to survive it. So I think that's what sparks all this, or just shipwrecks and storms and all that kind of stuff. So definitely keep that in mind. It was the largest witch trial in Scandinavia at the time, unfortunately. It was the peak of the witch hunts at the time as well. Like, I mean, everybody and their mom was getting questioned. Everybody and their mom was getting questioned, I'm telling you. It was absolutely insane. It starts, all right, September 2nd, 1662. And they grab a lady named Dorth, or it could be Dorothy because it does have an E on the end. Dorothy Laurit's daughter was brought in for questioning at the Vardo fortress, okay? She had been accused before. Like I say, she was accused in the second trial, but she got off. We're not really sure how, but she did. But now she's being brought back in to be asked more questions. And, you know, it just goes around and goes around. Because this one guy said that she bewitched 2 of his servants, okay? And this man's name was Lauritz Bros. Claimed that 2 of his servants were bewitched by her right before they both died, okay? But these people could have died from anything. obviously, but because he pointed the finger at somebody that had already been through a trial but was acquitted, I guess double jeopardy is not a thing in this, because she ends up going on trial again, of course, and questioned and all that fun stuff. So, what did old Dorothy say? Well, I'll tell you what she said that they did. She said that her and 4 other witches transformed into various different birds, like an owl, crow, a swan, and an eagle, okay? And they were have to open the wind knots, because remember in the last video I talked about how they tied knots together, basically doing cord magic. Okay, so they opened their wind knots and over the sea to make a boat sink, but the boat did not sink because she said that the guys on the boat, the crew, prayed, and that was the reason why it didn't work. And so that pretty much sealed her fate by saying that they turned into these animals and they flew over the sea. They tried to wreck a ship. They tried to evidently, they saw it as them trying to murder these people on the ship. And so Dorothy was burned at the stake on November 6, 1662, with 2 other women, followed by 2 more. So I guess the 4 women that flew with her were also found and burned at the stake. Also, I don't know what it is about this story and Christmas, but Christmas comes up a lot. They party with Satan on Christmas a lot in this, but this is the part where we get to the kiddos, okay? Where the kids are being questioned and things of that matter. And so we have 2 children named Ingeborg and Karen Iversdottir. They were 8 years old, and their mom was recently executed in the second trial. See how they're trying to like go through the family tree, basically. Yeah, and so they were brought out for questioning, along with Malin, Mad's daughter. Okay, no, Marin Oldstatter. They came out with Marin Oldstatter, and so they started saying some stuff and telling the priest some stuff. The children told many stories. The priest had a hard time making them say this thing, this catechism thing, which is, I had to look it up. It's basically a book where you ask somebody religious questions and see if they can answer you in a religious way. You know, it's also a teaching book for children to teach them about the Bible and things like that. But they were trying to ask them questions about this book, and evidently the girls couldn't answer them in the absolute exact proper way that they wanted them to answer, because there's always a certain way to do it, and if you don't do it perfectly, then you're a witch. You know, we've heard this before in other stories. They used to instruct the young and testify their faith with that as well. And so because they couldn't say it, they were made to stay in the fortress, because they went to Vardo Fortress, and they stayed in this thing called a witch's hole. Yeah, a witch's hole. And I'm not really sure, but they were kept in that fortress. I'm not sure what a witch's hole is, because there was a lot of different variations, but you can imagine it's like a hole in the ground, and you know, you're in there. It's terrible conditions, because nobody cared about jail conditions back then, you know. And so these 2 children were kept there, and they were there to await the verdict of all the stories that they had said, basically. And so the confession was that Ingeborg confessed on January 26th, 1663, okay? She said, and of course she names somebody else. Don't know why they do this, but they do. So she named somebody else, and she's like, so me and this girl named Solveig, Nils' daughter, celebrated Christmas in 1662 in Kleiberg with Marin Oldstatter and Sergei Klockskar while prisoned in the witch's hole. Okay, and I'm going to tell you how they did this. You're probably wondering, well, how did they get out if they were in the witch's hole? You know what I mean? Well, where there's a will, there's a way. Am I right? So Ingeborg and Solveig transformed themselves, yes, into cats, and they crawled underneath the grate or the gate or whatnot, whatever was keeping them in the witch's hole, okay? And then met up with Marian and Sergei who came flying in from Vardanger, someplace in Clyburg, okay? They flew in, they all met up together, they broke into the basement, and they got drunk on the wine that was actually for, like the sacraments and stuff like that for the church. But they got into the wine, and they got really, really drunk. And they said that Satan was holding a candle for them while they were down there, so that they could see what they're doing and all this other fun stuff. And of course he was there. And one of them had gotten so drunk that Satan actually had to help her back to her cell before anybody knew that they were gone. And of course, the next day, the priests were like, "Oh yeah, we were missing some wine." It was not those women. They were in jail, okay? But of course, this names more people. And this also brings a problem for more people, unfortunately. Now, Salve, Neil's daughter, had confessed in January that in Christmas of 1661, yes, I said Christmas, because they always party with the devil at Christmas during these things, for some reason. So anyway, they had a huge witches' Sabbath on Christmas of 1661, and it was held at the Dorjefell Mountain in Norway. And the witches arrived. They all arrived in like different shapes. Of course, they took on forms of familiars and stuff like that. They drank and they danced with Satan, who was in the form of a black dog. Yes. Okay. I love how they just, take on the form of all these animals and things like that, supposedly. They drank and they danced with Satan. And, Margaret, Jan's daughter, danced with Satan and lost her shoe. But Satan gave her a brand new one. I mean, who would believe that story? Who would, as like a sane person, who would believe that story? Like, no, that did not happen. But this is what they're being tortured into saying, these kids. Now, Marin Old's daughter was 12 years old, and her mother had also been one of the 17 in the second witch trials, okay? And so that's kind of why she's pinpointed, all right? And so she was being taken care of by an aunt because her mom died, until her aunt got burned, okay, as part of the second witch trial, okay? So now this 12-year-old has been arrested. This is because these other kids had pointed her out. And it's just so weird how they just bring people in. It's like, but you'll see that there is one girl that does not break, and we will get to her, don't you worry. This one does break. Marin, she was taken, like I said, she had been taken care of by an aunt. Now she's being arrested because the Egensborg girl had said that she met up with them, because Marin, then they weren't in jail, and Marin, I don't think Marin and Salve were in jail at the time. They just met up with them somehow, or so they say, but they really didn't. So Marin, she decides she's going to go on ahead and say a whole bunch of crazy, and what she says is she claimed to visit hell, okay? She said that Satan gave her a tour. Yes, she did. And she said that Satan showed her this huge water in a black valley, which boiled when he blew fire through a horn of iron. Now, you'd think that would be a bad thing, right? Because there was people in the water. But, so when he did that, he boiled the people. And he asked her, he was like, he put ham in the water and cooked it while it was boiling, and told her that she would boil too if she served him as a reward. Like, how do they come up with this stuff? I guess you will say anything under torture. I'm telling you. You'll say anything to make the torture stop. And this is a little girl. This is a 12-year-old girl. She has no idea what's going on. So she's just coming up with stuff off the top of her head. They said they went to Sabbath on Domain, which is another mountain, where Satan played music on a red violin and gave the witches beer and then followed them home personally, like a gentleman, would. Like walk you to your door, I mean, I'm guessing that's what it sounds like to me. So naturally, when she is asked, who's there with you? Did you see anybody that you know? She gave out 5 names. She sure did. And among the 5 was Ingeborg, of course, one that we've already talked about. Who she said followed her to hell as a dove. Yes. I'm not sure what that's about. But yeah, supposedly followed her to hell as a dove. Okay. And Ingeborg was brought in for questioning. Okay. They bring her in for questioning because before, they didn't take what the two were saying as truth. The church did not. They were like, no, this is not truth. And so they bring in the Ingeborg Krog for questioning. Now, this chick denies everything. Okay. Now, remember in the first trial how one of the girls said that if you douse them with water, that breaks Satan's spell, over them being able to speak about, going to the Sabbaths and stuff like that. That breaks the spell or whatnot. Well, she did not pass the water test because she still would not confess. She was steadfast, this chick, this girl, okay? I mean, she's just a kid, okay? So, because she passed the water test, all of a sudden, they're like, okay, well, that didn't work because she still kept saying she was innocent. Hey, Popcorn, you just go on ahead and make your appearance in the video as always. Click, clack, click, clack. She was then tortured some more, okay? Yeah, she was, unfortunately. And the only thing she said, she would confess to nothing except one thing. She said that a woman that was executed in the past had given her a fish and she ate that fish. She was like, does that make me a witch? Is that kind of like what you want to hear? Because she's absolutely trying to tell the truth in this situation. And so that woman had been executed for sorcery in 1653 in the second trial, and that maybe she consumed some of her magic or whatnot, but that story, like I say, it didn't satisfy the courts, not at all. So because her story did not satisfy the courts, we got old Sauvé coming in, and Nils' daughter, and said that Ingeborg was as much a witch as the rest of them, basically trying to point the finger at her to get the direction off of herself. And I mean, I just don't understand that part, point blank period, but it is what it is. And so Nils, she said that she was much as witch as the rest of them, that she had made a boat get lost at sea. Yeah, Ingeborg had made a ship get lost at sea, okay, with her magic. She was so powerful, she made a ship get lost, And so this is what Sauvé is saying. And of course they're going to believe that because that's what they want to hear. You see what I mean? It's not a good situation to be in. And so they're probably trying to figure out a way to get themselves out. This girl, Sauvé, actually also said that Ingeborg had told them how to not tell the truth, how to pass the water test. Get water thrown on you. You're supposed to not be possessed by the devil anymore, and so you can tell them the things that you've done. Well, not in this instance, no. No. Ingeborg, she was very, very assertive of her innocence, very much so. She did not give up. She did not say no. She was like, nah. She didn't point the finger. She wasn't about to lie on anybody, okay? This girl, Ingeborg, I hope I'm saying her name right. I'm sorry if I'm not. But this chick's about to be a martyr, guys. I'm just telling you, she's fixing to be a martyr. She asserted her innocence. She said, then they started to burn and cut her with hot irons, and sulfur was put on her chest, okay? And then she said, I cannot lie on myself or on others. Oh no. Such can they torment the body, but they cannot torment the soul. That's what she said, quote unquote. She was actually tortured to death, and her corpse was laid on an island like opposite of the gallows that I guess they had probably already built from the previous 2 trials. We have to give her props. I mean, this is the first one really that we have talked about that has absolutely denied being a witch, and even trying to give them information. Well, you know, I got a fish from somebody one time and y'all convicted her as a witch, so does that make me a witch? Like, she was a child. She didn't understand. To me, that made her a martyr. She wasn't gonna lie. She wasn't gonna lie, point blank period. And I love that. I think that's amazing. Don't lie then. You're not supposed to lie. It's not a good thing. You know what I mean? Woo! Got a little dusty there for a second. Now we have an 8-year-old that pops into the picture, okay? And this 8-year-old is named Karen Ivan's daughter, and she claimed that 3 witches in the shape of crows attempted to kill an official with a needle. Yes, a needle. I'm not really sure how you're going to do that. You're going to be posting there poking for a long time. But, yeah, that's where we're at, you know. I'm just saying. This other chick named Maid Ellen was arrested as one of them, as one of the shapes of the crows or whatnot, you know. And Ellen was burned with Sergi Cloquer on February 27th of 1663. And I know I talked about Sergi just for a minute, but she got the guy too, and so did Ellen. Yeah, I'm not sure about Karen, but we're gonna get there. So there was this chick named Barbara from Fadstow, something like that, okay? And she was pointed out by Marin as well. Marin is just almost like a Karen, you know what I mean? She is just really pointing the finger and trying to get out of this. But anyway, and so Marin pointed her out as one of the ones that had flown with Dorth and Domin, okay? Barbara said that Marin accused her because she was encouraged by this doctor's wife. Now, this chick, Anne Rodius, okay, she be sticking her nose in places she don't even belong, point blank. And she was actually exiled, her and her husband, who's a doctor, from Oslo to northern Norway. So like sending them there was like a punishment. So you would think a person that's somewhere on a punishment would just lay low for a while until the time passes and then maybe they could go back to Oslo. No, not so much. Not so much. She said the doctor, the doctor's wife pointed out that the wife and daughter of one of the members of the court as witches. So now we got some people pointing fingers at people in the court that are witches, the court officials, okay? That did not go over so well. No, it didn't. Just remember that chick, I'm telling you, the doctor's wife, because she's going to come in handy here later. Not really handy, but she's really going to get herself into some trouble here later, okay? but the courts kind of ignored what she said, and Barbara and 4 other kids were burned on April 8th of 1663 as witches. Yes. So now we've got Solveig that's left and Marguerite. So they're left, but they got burned along with 2 other women on March 20th of 1663. So we come to June 25th of 1663, okay, and the last of the accused witches are about to be questioned and all that fun stuff. Okay, so the last ones we have are Magdalene from Andersby, Ringhilde Inner's daughter, and Gertrude Silver's daughter, along with her daughter, Kristen Soren's daughter, were all brought up for a witch trial. I know, that's a whole lot of names, and I apologize, but, you know, this one has a lot of names in it because I'm saying it's a huge witch trial. It's like one of the biggest ones ever. And so all these witches that were in the holding cell, all these were in the holding cell. They brought them up from the witch's hole, okay? And you got Magdalene and Gertrude Ranghilled, okay, and the children. Now, they claimed that Marian and the other children had come up with confessions under the influence of the exiled Anne, the doctor's wife. Yes, okay. They were like, yeah, we were under the influence of that chick, straight up. Because if she's gonna stick her nose in, then they're gonna go ahead and bring her into the whole entire party. It's like, if you want to be here, we can bring you in and yeah, join the party. She said that Anne had visited them all in jail and threatened them with torture to make them confess. Now, because of this, Magdalene, Gertrude, and Ranghilled were freed, and all the children were acquitted in June of 1663 because this Anne chick put her nose in where it didn't belong. Now, even Marin jumped into this one, okay, with Anne. Marin's like, guess who told me to lie? That's right, Anne. And so Marin is now trying to use a way to get out of this because she's saying that Anne had also told her to lie when she would come and visit and all this other fun stuff, right? And so she said that Anne had misled her to lie against other people and denouncing them from witchcraft. So Marian was sentenced for having lied on herself and others, which she did, okay? She did lie on herself and others about doing witchcraft and stuff like that. And that's not a very good thing. You shouldn't do that. Although, that's basically what every single witch trial is a bunch of chicks finger pointing at a bunch of other chicks. Just pointing fingers, you know what I mean? And so anyways, Marin was sentenced for having lied on herself and others, so she had to stay. She was sentenced to a workhouse. Yeah, she wasn't sentenced to death. She was sentenced to a workhouse, you know, I guess because they felt like since Anne had influenced her, maybe they shouldn't kill her. But although they recognized that she had lied. So that's a step in the right direction, you know. These kids are lying, you know what I mean? Get this, okay? So the doctor himself, you know, got a letter from the king that basically pardoned him from anything that has happened, like to make the doctor was covered. And of course, as I was reading this, I was like, not seen anything about the wifey though, you know what I mean? And yeah, the wife did not get one of those letters. No, she did not. His wife was exiled to the Vardo fortress and to stay there for the rest of her life, and she passed away in 1672. That was her punishment for sticking her nose somewhere it did not freaking belong, okay? I'm just saying, that's why we shouldn't be sticking our nose in other people's business, because then you drag yourself into something that don't have nothing to do with you. And she should have stayed on the low if she was already exiled from Oslo. And the thing about that is, we don't even know why she was exiled. It was kind of like on the quiet, you know, but the dude was a doctor, so they could do stuff like that on the quiet. But she just sounded like she was just this bored person that just had to get into this witch trial that was already terrible, okay? Lord have mercy. So 30 women were put on trial, okay, accused of sorcery and witchcraft. And one was sentenced to a workhouse, like I say. 2 were tortured to death, yes. And 18 were burned alive at the stakes. This is a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. It's the third of the 3 largest mass witch trials of northern Norway. Actually, one of the largest in that country in Scandinavia. Yeah, sure is. But the good news is they made a memorial, okay? And the memorial, there's actually 2, and they're in the same place. They were done by 2 different architects, and they're absolutely so beautiful. I'm going to be posting a lot of pics because they're stunning. And one of the girls actually didn't even get to live long enough that designed one. She didn't get to live long enough, unfortunately. Her name was Louise Bourgeot. She passed away in 2010, and it was actually finished in 2011. But they still used her ideas and her plans and all that other kind of stuff because she was an architect. And so these places were opened in, like I say, 2011, and it's to commemorate the trials of the executions of 1621 for the 91 people of witchcraft. Basically, from the First War, the Second, and the Third War all together, 91 people had their names on a plaque there, which is actually sweet as crap. And the memorial is the one that Louise made. She called it the Damned, the Possessed, and the Beloved, and it's actually my favorite one. I think it's the prettiest one. I would love to go there one day. It's two different buildings, like I say, but the memorials were built there to remember the innocent people that were slain, just for supposedly doing witchcraft, when people were really just, there were storms, they were losing people, and they had to blame somebody. But you got to think where this is located is at the northern tip of where all the three of those countries are. And it's so freezing and cold up there. I can't imagine the storms. And like I say, when you fall off the boat, it's not just falling off and climbing back on, you freeze to death. And so it was harsh conditions, and they had to find a scapegoat, as usual. It's called the Stillness Memorial. I think that's how you say that. But I always like it when I do these stories and I see that, they try to commemorate. They try to overcome the mistakes that they made back then, None of those women were witches. None of them caused any kind of boats to crash. But sometimes when you're getting tortured like that, and if you're a child, you're not really understanding, except for Ingeborg, because she understood the assignment. She's like, I'm not saying nothing. Point blank, period. I'm not saying anything because I did not do anything. Now, maybe I bought a fish from a chick one time that, and she got accused of magic. So is that what you guys are wanting me to talk about? And they're like, it doesn't make any sense. And so, yeah, in this third trial, we have the women of past trials, children, going on trial for things that their mom or their aunt or whoever did. It's so unfortunate, but that's just the way it is, I really like the Ingeborg chick. I thought she was super rad. I love the fact that, like I said, she didn't care. She was not going to go down for doing something that she did not do. Okay? And I know that the majority of these women were just doing what they could do for that time. They were being tortured. They were being hurt. They were in jail in the witch's hole of this fortress. You can imagine that they probably weren't getting any food. If they were, it probably wasn't much. Maybe it was like a little bit, just a tiny bit a day. It's sad. And, I hate it. But that's the story of the second and third Vardo Witch Trial. If you ever are in Norway, go visit these memorials. They look really beautiful. It's definitely been added to my bucket list, as a lot of these places have been. And so this is the second part of the series, and I know it's kind of long. I'm sorry, but it was such big trials and so many names and so many finger pointing and so many deaths. It's just unreal, And I think what we need to pull from this is that obviously people nowadays don't blame witches when bad weather comes. They don't. We read the weather, and that's something that they didn't do back then. Maybe obviously the guys on the ships knew how to read weather and things like that, but that's not any kind of magic. That's just something that's kind of passed down from generation to generation, you know, from captain to captain on how to read weather and things of that nature. And so, I don't know, maybe they couldn't read the weather back then that well either, you know. So, but yeah, all this happened because of storms. And then women being tortured, and for them to getting stopped being tortured, they would have to say whatever these people were wanting them to say. Because as we saw, Ingeborg never said a story that they absolutely wanted to hear, that they would absolutely believe. And she never would give it up, and so she ended up dying in torture. As a martyr, in my personal opinion, she died as a martyr. She was like, I'm not going down for lying, and I'm not lying on anybody else. So, this is an awesome story. I love reading about it. There's actually a book that came out in 2023 in September called the Vardo Witch Trials. If you guys want to read more about it, you can definitely grab that book. It's really good. But anyway, that wraps up our episode for today. And I'm sorry it took me a minute. It's spring break this week. And so for me to get a time or a second to myself takes a bit. So, but anyways, I love you guys. And I hope that you have a glorious week. And if nobody's told you today, I love you. So much love.